Why can't I talk to my friends about how much we make and whether or not I can afford to go on this vacation with them? One of the biggest issues for people or hardest parts about finance for people is zooming out. If we want to have children in the future, there is a motherhood tax that will limit your ability to start investing. So no matter what age you start, you just need to do it. And so I started investing with a really small amount.
Hi, Alyssa. I'm so excited to have you on the Go Girl podcast. Welcome.
Thank you so much. I'm excited to be here and chat with you.
Same, I've been watching your reels on Instagram, and you have such like a bestie vibe to all those like super anxious money topics. So that's what I love about your brand. Would you like to start by telling me a bit about like your personal journey? How did this mixed up money started?
Of course, yes. I have the most ironic entry into personal finance in comparison to most people because I actually started my journey when I was in tens of thousands of dollars of consumer debt and I had student loans because I didn't understand money. I was scared of money and I was constantly avoiding looking at my bank accounts. So when I got engaged, which was back in 2015, thanks, I very quickly realized that I needed to pay for a wedding and that I had a ton of debt and it wasn't going to be realistic for me unless I found a better job. So I got a job in marketing working for a debt consolidation organization, which was eye-opening almost immediately when I went into my training sessions and I was sitting with clients, and when they were telling their story, I realized I am the client. I am struggling. I have debt. I don't know how to get out of my debt. And so I went home and I started Googling what to do, and I came across the personal finance community and a bunch of blogs and bloggers and started learning a lot about money very quickly. And so to hold myself accountable while I repaid my debt, I actually started blogging about it publicly on the internet. And it kind of catapulted me into mixed up money and has since grown into a community for women who, yeah, are looking for judgment free spaces when it comes to their money.
That is amazing. I need that so badly. And I want to dive a bit deep into what you said, like opening your bank account, the anxious feelings, the guilt after you spend money, and like the whole sort of taboo around it, that it's something that you deal with all on your own. Can you like tell us like why do these feelings sort of originate according to you, and like why is it such a taboo to talk about money, right?
Well, it's a great question. Like, why? We need to look at that anytime there's something that confuses you. Like, why can't I talk to my friends about how much we make and whether or not I can afford to go on this vacation with them? And really, it's just because society tells us that we need to be hush hush about money. And mostly because, who does that benefit? If the rest of us don't talk
Mm,
about it, it always ends up benefiting the elite and the wealthy. And so most financial systems are actually built for the average person to fail. And I think as soon as we start talking about money and making money more comfortable, it quickly becomes this realization that, oh, it's actually not as scary as it seems. I hear a lot of like some of my best friends in the community call finance pale and male. That's exactly what it is. It's like very male dominated, very overwhelming and intimidating. And a lot of us are just trying to break down those walls, make it more accessible, make it more fun, because it doesn't have to be this taboo.
yeah, I think like just these sort of, I think gender norms have to have a role to play in this. Like, since you were a child, at least growing up in India, I always saw my dad dealing with the taxes and all the money stuff. My mom was a housewife, so she used to just get a certain budget to run the household and no say in any money decisions whatsoever. And how was it for you, like growing up? Did you see parity in terms of your parents making money decisions together, or was it something where your dad used to make most of the decisions?
Very similar to you. My mom was a stay-at-home mom for the most of my earlier years. And then when she did find a job, it was more just for her to get back into the business, not necessarily to make money. So my dad was always the breadwinner. He actually gave my mom an allowance, which now would give me a
Mm-hmm.
massive ick if I were to see someone else in a relationship experiencing that, because it is like one person's in control of all of the money.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm very much of the belief system, and in my household, it's very much about equity and making sure that everybody contributes their share financially and otherwise and has the same decision making power. Like, there is no power imbalance in my household today because I saw that growing up. And so I think it's totally, it happens with whatever household you grew up in, right? That is how you view money. Those are money scripts, they call them, which are these just invisible scripts that you hold, or beliefs that you hold about money that may not necessarily be true, but because that's how you were raised, that's how you
Mm-hmm.
still see money and view money in adulthood.
Right. I think I can think from my childhood, like my dad, like eating from outside used to be like a big thing. Like we're spending money, we can like make food at home, and I think that's a big theme in India as well. So maybe that's why even ordering Uber Eats now, I get like anxiety where I'm like, should I just go to the kitchen, do something, make something, or should I should I do I really need to spend $20 on Uber Eats right now, or something like that. So can you give me some examples from your life or things you've seen around yourself where these money scripts are like in play, where there's some certain situations in childhood that you face, and then now you have these beliefs in your mind, which are really hard to get rid of?
Well, one of the most common things that'll happen is anyone that grows up in poverty tends to have a very strong scarcity mindset
Mm.
that is really, really hard to break when you enter adulthood. And it actually tends to lead to a lot of guilt, which is maybe what you're describing with the, like, I can't do fast food. I have food at home. That's crazy for
Mm-hmm.
me to go and treat myself when I would just be spending money unnecessarily. A lot of the times that's that scarcity mindset that makes us feel this financial guilt, because when you're so obsessed with that period in your life when you didn't have something, you can't focus on anything else. And so if you grew up with less, you're probably still stuck in that same mindset because it feels comfortable. It's a habit. It's a space where you just know how to exist there. And even
Mm-hmm.
though the coping mechanism maybe worked when you were younger, it might not be serving you in adulthood. And so for me, because I did have a little bit of scarcity mindset when I was repaying my debt, and then after I did pay off my debt, I had to do a lot of changing language and staying, instead of saying, like, I can't afford this, I had to remind myself that there was a real reason I didn't want to buy something, that maybe it didn't align with my current priorities, or maybe I just wanted to experience that in a different way. But I always was looking for the real reason as opposed to those scripts or beliefs that I held. So it's a lot about changing your language, changing your habits, and healing your relationship with money, which is often very hard for people to do because they don't even realize they have a relationship with money in the first place.
Mm-hmm. I think for money, it's like something you don't want to discuss, you don't want to talk about, so you don't even want to focus on the relationship you have with money. And in my personal life, it has been like that all throughout growing up. And only recently, like the past couple of years, I'm trying to realize, okay, why am I so anxious opening my bank account? Or like, why am I so anxious paying for a bill that I had like a good time and I enjoyed, and now I have to pay for that service, right? So it's definitely something that's rampant and we see around ourselves, and we never sort of discuss it. So you paid a huge amount of debt yourself. I would love to know, like, how did you make that happen?
Yeah, sure. So that was back again in 2015. So I put together a plan, a new budget, where essentially I slashed almost every single expense that I had, with a very heavy focus on fixed expenses. You'll often hear like financial professionals tell you that you should cut your non essentials, like
Mm-hmm.
going out for dinner with friends, those small coffees that you pick
Lattes.
up. Yeah,
Yes.
exactly. That's the classic cliche. This is what you need to do, and then you'll be able to afford to buy a house. I realized very quickly that it was actually more beneficial for me to find ways to reduce my fixed expenses because those are the expenses that weren't going to change every single month. So things like my rent and my phone bill and electricity or things like that. And so what I did for those is I actually called to negotiate a lower cell phone bill, lower interest rates on my credit cards because I wanted to be able to make higher payments without just getting by and just making the minimum payments, which a lot of people don't realize they can do, but you can negotiate your interest rates on your credit cards. You can call your phone company and be like, hey, is there anything you can do to help me get my phone bill down $10, $20 every single month? And I cut my rent in half by living with
Wow.
six other people, but it was a sacrifice I was willing to make to get ahead financially. And so by doing that, I was actually able to put more than 40% of my income towards repaying my debt and pay it all off in less than a year. And so there was a ton of sacrifice, which is why I left my debt repayment with such a big scarcity mindset. But that frugality was what kind of catapulted my financial success and the ability to build wealth.
Wow, that is amazing. Just the fact that you were able to pay so much debt. How much was it again, if you don't mind sharing?
It was just under $20,000.
That is a lot because when it comes to even saving $3,000, not just for debt repayment, but just like saving it for the future, it is so hard to do that. And from other financial stuff and things that I've read, people advise that you need to save 3 to 6 months of your monthly expenses in your emergency fund or as I like to call it, opportunity fund or something, because I just don't like the sound of the emergency fund. So, is there any advice that you can give us to like save that much money? Because saving like 10K or 20K sounds very overwhelming if you think about it.
Yeah. First of all, I love Opportunity Fund. That's such a great shift. I think that's a wonderful thing to call it. I am a huge advocate for emergency funds. And although 3 to 6 months is what the experts recommend, again, I have different mindset around many things in finance because I feel like it is very traditional. And so I do think it really depends on your lifestyle and what you need. So if you are a homeowner and you have dependents and you have a vehicle, you're going to need a lot more money than someone who is a renter, who doesn't have children, and who maybe doesn't own a vehicle. So there's a lot of different variables at play when it comes to how much you actually need in your emergency fund. So when you say like $10, $20,000, even $3,000, it can be overwhelming. So you need to first actually get a clear picture of what your expenses look like and not your like stretched beyond your means expenses, your bare bones. This is what I would need to survive, is what you want to put in your emergency fund. You don't need any flair when you're going through an emergency, so you don't need to save
Mm-hmm.
more than what you'll need to spend. And so when you finally know that number, start small. It's the most important thing is that you have some sort of security. That should be your first financial goal when you're getting started with your money is giving yourself stability and security. And that is an emergency fund or an opportunity fund as you call it. So, when I started to build mine, I was putting $20 a week into a high interest savings account or a high yield savings account, and that was enough for me to get started. It was something. And I still to this day have that $20 transfer every single week that goes into my emergency fund because it's something that constantly needs to be replenished. This is money you will be spending. It's inevitable that we're going to face some sort of financial emergency in our life. And so it doesn't have to be this huge, overwhelming number. You can start with $1,000 as your goal.
Mm-hmm.
Get to $1,000, see how that feels, and if you feel like you need more, then you just continue to go down that path. Most everything in money is going to be time consuming. You have to be patient. It's never something you can accomplish quickly, but it's the end goal that makes you feel so great and so successful. And that's also why I think it's so important we talk about money and it shouldn't be taboo because we want to be able to celebrate things like that. Like you saved $1,000 for your emergencies. That is a huge win and it deserves to be celebrated.
Yeah, and Referring your book, I think 41% Americans cannot even pay for $1,000 emergency, and that was such a shocking stat for me to hear. Maybe also because I come from a very Asian culture, so we have different problems. We save too much. All my life, my parents have just been saving. So just knowing that it's a very different culture here where people live paycheck to paycheck is kind of scary for me, more so because I think because of my cultural background as well. But yeah, so I got your book last week, and honestly, it's been such a great read. And I just want to know, like, was it intentional to sort of make it so fun with illustrations for like beginners? Because it definitely helped me.
Yeah, it's definitely for beginners because I want people to feel safe and comfortable talking about finances. It is more something you can reach for when you're like, I'm going through this big, scary thing with my money. I just need someone to tell me what to do or what my options are. And you'll be able to pull out that chapter because it is like color coded and less intimidating than most things that we face in our finances. And I think too, like, because you said culturally you're more prone to saving more money, I also just like, I have to plug my friend here who I think that you might love as a resource for finances and maybe some of your listeners too. Her name's Parween Mander. So it's
Mm.
parween.mander on Instagram. I'm not sure if you follow her already. But she's just such a great resource. Same background as you and same culture as you. And she speaks so much about how different everything is with money. And so because of that, I think the reason that there are so many voices in this space is because everyone has different perspectives, everyone has different upbringings, and we are looking to people that we can relate to and connect to on those different levels. So, sorry, I had to just bring that up because I was like, you would love her. And I think
No,
that,
definitely, I'll check her out. Like,
yeah.
cause I'm in my personal finance journey right now. I just started investing, just started earning. So like now it's like, oh, you need to automate it to savings, investments, and there's so much advice out there. So I always love like learning about money, but this didn't come to me naturally, and I would love to talk more about that. That as a woman, I don't know, talking about money, reading about money didn't come to me naturally. I think the first book I read was Rich Dad and Poor Dad recently,
Mm,
and that's when I started thinking, my job is not enough. If I want the life that I want, if I want retirements, like I just can't think about my job and my expenses. I need to start thinking about savings, investments, passive income, and whatnot, right? So, I think I would love to hear your perspective on it. Why is it important for women to actually like intentionally try to learn about money, because it might not come naturally to us, but it's so important for our own financial independence, because a lot of women out there are still dependent on their partners for taxes, for savings, investments, and I just feel like financial independence is a very important part to even lead like the life you want to lead. Can you comment a bit on that?
absolutely. This one is something I'm very passionate about, just like you are. I can tell in the way that you're speaking about it because it is a measure of security for women. It is something that you need just to keep yourself safe. And because we face so much more difficulty than men when it comes to financial situations, you need to be a little bit more prepared and a little bit more involved than you may think. And I wonder if maybe it doesn't feel like it comes naturally to us because we grew up thinking that it wasn't our responsibility, depending
Mm-hmm.
on what we saw with our parents. And so I don't think really anything in life comes naturally to us. Everything takes a little bit of learning. There's always going to be a learning curve. But the reason that it's so important for women to be involved with finances is, for one thing, we face a lot more uphill battles, particularly if we want to have children in the future. There is a motherhood tax that will limit your ability to earn. And so the sooner you know that, the sooner you can kind of plan ahead and be aware of that cost. Then there's just things like women live longer than men. We need to save a little bit more than men. We need to be prepared in a case that maybe we were in a relationship and our partner was managing all of the finances. What happens if that relationship ends?
Mm-hmm.
What happens if that partner walks out the door unexpectedly, which unfortunately does happen more than we think it will? Are we going to know what credit cards we have, what the balances are, how to even pay the bills? and what our life's going to look like moving forward. So you do want to give yourself some sort of security. And the very first step is just understanding the basics. The more financial literacy you have, the more confident you feel when you have to make a big decision about your money.
Yeah, and money, like you said, is security. It is also independence. It also gives you the ability to make those decisions, right? Because if you're always dependent on your partner, what happens when he walks out? And I saw this a lot growing up as well, where my dad had a lot of control. And there's also like a power dynamics when one person has control over all the money. And the sad situation in India is that most of the men do, and a lot of women stay in troubled marriages as well, just because they're not financially independent. And there's a lot of societal stuff as well, but I think money is still a like it gives you the ability to live the life the way you want to. So there's definitely need for women to understand that, and I think your book is a great way to understand those personal basic stuff just to get started. So I would love for you to tell us, like, what exactly do we need in our financial first aid box?
Well, one of the things that is very on topic with what you were just saying is I actually divide my emergency funds into, I kind of compartmentalize them. It's just easier for my brain. It helps me give myself permission to use that money because if you are frugal or have been frugal in your life, it can be really difficult to let go of
Mm-hmm.
money. And so I like to label it so that I feel like, okay, I know I've given myself permission to spend this money on this specific situation. And so one of the emergency funds that I have and that my partner has, even though we've been married for almost 10 years, even though we've been in a relationship for almost 20 years and there's no issues, we both have our own emergency funds separate
Oh,
from
okay.
each other. And we are
Mm.
married, we have 2 kids, but we still have these emergency funds just in case. They're a relationship emergency fund. And so it just protects you from that situation. Like, what if something does happen? And it's not a very big amount. I think we both only have $1,000 in them. And
Mm-hmm.
it's enough to like go to a hotel for a night if you need to. It's enough to give you a choice. And so I do think that everyone that is in a relationship should have some sort of emergency fund if they can. Um, I also have an emergency fund for my house because I'm a homeowner and it's super, super common for people to be unprepared for the many expenses that can pop up. And that one is actually just the amount of my biggest appliance, which would be my furnace, just in case it breaks down one day and we don't have to pull from our paychecks to cover that
Mm-hmm.
cost. And the other emergency fund that I have is just kind of a life one. Like, yeah, you lose your job or your car breaks down. There's just so many different areas that can completely tank your financial journey. And if you're looking to build wealth and security and invest for retirement, you never want to have to stop doing those things or sacrifice your future because you weren't prepared for the present.
I love that all of your emergency funds have a purpose attached to it as well. That means that, okay, if something does break down in your house, you don't feel that guilt or anxious that, oh, this was my life stuff, this was from me getting unemployed and now I have to spend it all on my house. No, you have a house emergency fund that you can use. Okay, love it. I would love to also dive into like your investment journey. I saw that you reached 100K on Wealthsimple, and I am on that path. Like, I'm hoping
Yay!
in a few years I'll get there. So I would love, how did it start? So from a negative net worth, how did you get to 100K in investments?
Sure. So I first started investing when I was 26 years old, so a little bit later than most people do. And I also just always want to make sure people know it's never too late to start investing. So no matter what age you start, you just need to do it. And so I started investing with a really small amount. I think it was $100 every single month. And it was just automated. I just kept putting it into a robo advisor for easy accessibility. There was no learning curve for me. I didn't have to worry about reinvesting. I didn't have to worry about learning every single term that there is in finance, like what's a dividend and what's an ETF and how do I know which ETF to choose? Because even that, if you've never invested since, is going to feel overwhelming. And
Mm-hmm.
so I loved that I could just invest. I didn't have to do anything. I knew I was building my self security for the future. And so I started putting just $100 a month away. And every single $100 that went in felt so good because I knew that I was giving myself a little bit more security. And so as that started to increase, I started to increase my income to give myself more opportunities by starting mixed up money and having a side hustle. And so most of my income with my side hustle all went towards my investments. Any extra disposable income I had, I started dumping it into my investment accounts. And so since 2016, so less than a decade, yeah, I eventually hit $100,000 between all of my investment accounts. And it's already, I think that was a month ago, and it just is going so quickly now. Every time you hit a major milestone with your investments, like 10,000, 20,000, 50,000, it starts to increase so quickly because
Mm-hmm.
your everything is growing, everything's compounding, and your investment journey becomes easier because you're doing less work. That is that passive income.
Wow, yes. I think I read somewhere there's like a 7 or 8 year rule. I forget how many exactly, that in every 7 to 8 years your investments literally double, based on like the industry average of compounding and everything. So that is a lot. So let's say you invest 10K now, guys, it'll be 20K in 7 years. And that's by doing nothing, literally just by investing and keeping your money invested. That is amazing. So you said that you had a side hustle. That means that you had multiple income streams. So can you dive a bit deep into like how important it is to have multiple income streams? And because today's culture is all about having 5 different side hustles, being your own boss while doing a job. It can be quite toxic as well, like the whole hustle culture right now. So can you comment like a bit about that?
Yes. So I was that toxic person. I had always had 3 jobs, probably, well, up until actually December. December is the
Mm,
first time I quit my full time job and I just do mixed up money now. And
congratulations. That's
thank
amazing.
you. Prior to that, I had a full time 9 to 5 my entire life. I had mixed up money as my side hustle, and I always had a part time job or a contract that I was working
Mm-hmm.
on because I was so obsessed with building wealth and making money. And so it wasn't really healthy and it wasn't doing me any good. And it did me good in the sense that I did get out of debt very quickly and I have done all of the major financial milestones that I wanted to accomplish. But I'm burnt out.
Mm-hmm.
I'm almost too focused on money. Money was controlling me and not the other way around. And
Mm-hmm.
so, while I completely understand side hustle and hustle culture, and I am all for it if that's how you feel like you're going to make the most growth, what I now tell and would tell my past self is that the focus really needs to be on your main income.
Mm-hmm.
It's better for you to invest time and energy into increasing your main source of income by finding a better job somewhere else, recognizing whether or not the industry you're actually in right now is going to be able to provide you long term financial security,
Mm-hmm.
and making the necessary changes to increase that main income. So, whether that's more education, uh, doing the job switch every 3 years because you're actually more likely to increase your income that way than staying loyal to one company, or yeah, maybe it is side hustles, but you have to focus on one income first so that you can avoid that burnout. Because at the end of the day, the more jobs you work, the less energy you have for the one job that really is bringing in the most security.
Yeah, I think it's also like the whole return on investment sort of discussion where if you're spending 80% of your time on something, is it bringing you at least 80% of your revenue or income, right? And
Yes.
a lot of people forget to focus on the big aspects. Like, I love when you said that you cut down your fixed costs. People would be like, okay, I'll stop buying a latte. I don't know what people have against lattes, but I love mine. I can never stop buying them, but people would be like, "Oh, I'll save, I don't know, $200 on Starbucks, but I'll pay $900 more in rent just because I want to live in a fancy place." And not focus on your main job, which is getting you 80% of your income, and rather focus on those 10-20% of income increments, which takes so much of your time and leave you burnt out completely. Because the end goal is not to have enough money accumulate money, it's also to enjoy the money you have and live a good quality of life. And I think, I don't know, the biggest question that I have right now as a 20-year-old early professional is I don't know why it's not even the house or anything, it's retirement. And also, just there's a lot of discussion around going around with the inflation and everything. How are like young professionals going to buy their first house? How are we going to save for our retirement? Because I think you need like $1 million to retire in Canada now or something like that.
Yeah, it's an overwhelming number. I mean, everything's overwhelming right now.
Hmm.
Like economically, yes, inflation is high. It's stabilized now, but it doesn't go down once it goes up. And
Hmm.
so it is really overwhelming if you're a young person trying to decide where your focus should be. And with investing, like, how old are you? 20 exactly?
23.
23. You have so much time to invest for retirement. The beauty of your situation is that you have the time and you also have choices that you can make right now on what you want your future to look like. So, do you want to be financially independent by a certain age? Do you want
Hmm.
to work until 65 years old? What does retirement actually look like for you? One of the biggest issues for people or hardest parts about finance for people is zooming out and looking at what they
Hmm.
want long term because so many of us are so focused on just getting to tomorrow. And that is
Right.
especially true given the economic climate right now. So, if you can do that, if you can zoom out and look at what do I want my life to be 15 years from now, 20 years from now, 40 years from now, and start to adjust your finances in that regard, you'll be so much better off. So if you want to retire early, you'd go to like a retirement calculator or a future value calculator on Google. You can just Google future value calculator
Hmm.
and start punching in the numbers and playing around to see how much you'd need to invest every single month to reach the retirement goal that you have. And so, yeah, $1 million might be enough at 65 years old, but maybe it's not because maybe
Hmm.
you want to be able to travel once you're retired, and maybe you'll be wanting to live somewhere a bit more extravagant. You have to kind of decide what you want your lifestyle to look like before you can even decide or determine what your number is going to be. And so I think again it's more about the emotional aspects of money that we always forget because we're so focused on the math.
Yeah, I feel that so much because money is so emotional. Like, just working on myself and my relationship with money in the past 2 years, I've realized that there's so much deep-rooted traumas, emotions that come out when it has to do with money. And the amount doesn't matter. Sometimes, I think some people are okay with spending money on certain things because they have been conditioned to be okay with it, while for other things, you cannot spend money on it. So, how does someone like help themselves learn more about money, work on our anxieties, and like work on that guilt when you actually buy something you love, but still you don't have that guilt that, oh my God, I spent $20 more. Like, what's the point of money if you can't even enjoy it, right? So, how do we work on it ourselves?
That's a great question. I myself have been working on it for a decade already, and I learn something new about myself every single year.
Hmm.
And I think that's really what it comes down to is a lot of it is just asking questions like what happened to me? Why do I feel like this? Whose shame is this? Is it even mine? Because so often it is that generational trauma that's just carried within us.
Hmm.
And so a lot of the financial content that I actually consume to help heal my relationship with money are very much the opposite of what you'd hear from other people. So I love Psychology of Money by Morgan Housel
Hmm.
and Die with Zero by Bill Perkins is one of my favorite books, as well as a book called Scarcity. I forget the authors, but it was just such an eye opening read for me because as soon as you can kind of heal your relationship with money, the actual math is less intimidating because The more you talk, it's like a muscle. So, like, the more you weight lift,
Mm-hmm.
the easier that weight is to lift. The more you talk about money, the easier it is to talk about money. The more you check your banking, the easier it is to check your banking. So, it's kind of like choosing one area that you really want to prioritize and focus on. Maybe that is retirement, and focusing on that as your goal and kind of letting everything else just fall into place.
Yeah, and the cool part is that you need to only plan like once properly. I mean, you can keep readjusting it, but you need to plan once. Okay, this is my income, this is how much I need to invest, and then everything can be automated so that it's like done and set, and you don't need to think about it again. And by the end of the year, when you look at your bank account, you'll have so much money saved, so much money invested that you didn't even know. Like, I love your $20 per week. That does not feel like anything. That's like, I don't know, you just ate out one time and like that's gone. You don't even care about that money. But intentionally saving 80 to $100 is hard, but
Mm-hmm.
$20 is it. It's also playing with like your own mind to do things that feel comfortable to you. I love that. So before we end this episode, can we like get some last few tips for like your best tips for like people who want to start in this and want to start saving money, investing money? What are some tips that they can get from you?
Sure. So, my very first tip is if you're not investing yet, that should be your first priority. A lot of people feel like if they have debt or if they don't have an emergency fund, they need to completely put investments to the side and worry about those later. I did that and I regret that. You can do all three at the same time. I
Hmm.
think emergency fund should always come first as your priority, but it's okay to put like $30 in your emergency fund every month, $20 in your investments every month, $10
Hmm.
into like a high interest savings account for something else. You can spread it out or you can choose one to prioritize, but investing should always be a priority, especially if you're young, because the sooner you start and build the habit, that's actually going to be what makes the difference. It's not the amount that you're putting away, it's the habit of putting money away. So pay yourself first. My second tip isn't necessarily a tip, but more just give yourself grace and try to demoralize money because so many of us attach this like good and bad to money,
Hmm.
and that's not what it's for. That's the same as how we moralize things like housework. Like, oh, I'm so lazy, like I shouldn't be sitting on the couch, I should be cleaning my house right now. That's not fair to you. You're not a bad person because you didn't clean your house. Your house just isn't clean. It just wasn't a
Hmm.
priority that day. The same thing goes for money. You're not a bad person if you have debt. It's just debt. Sometimes we need it. And if we needed it to survive, that's the reality. It doesn't make you a bad person. And I guess my last tip is yeah, the zooming out. Focusing on
Hmm.
what you want long term. Don't forget about your future self because you want to spend money tomorrow. Make sure that there's a balance there.
I love all these three tips. I think this was a great episode. Thank you so much for taking out the time, and some things healed inside me. So
Oh,
uh,
yay!
it was great talking to you, and I love your content on Instagram. So I just look forward to like more reels, more episodes on your podcast, and I highly recommend this book to anybody who wants to get started in the money space.
Thank you so much. It was amazing to meet you, and I appreciate this chat.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of the Go Girl podcast. For more such inspiring conversations, do not forget to subscribe. You can also follow me on Instagram at Japnit Ahuja. Until next time, keep being unstoppable. You go, girl.